To move?
Yes, I'll
move. Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm moving at first stage here the Trade Union Bill 219, which is a bill that seeks to amend the Industrial Relations Act. They say that the toughest, the harshest anti-trade union laws in Europe are the anti-union laws in the UK. A legacy of the Thatcher era, with her anti-union laws from the 1980s, copper fastened by the Blair government in the 90s. But yet we had a situation last summer where the courts in Ireland blocked Ryanair pilots from striking, but the courts in the UK did not block strike by Ryanair pilots there. The anti-union laws in Ireland would give the UK anti-union laws a run for their money at the moment. The Industrial Relations Act, introduced under a Fianna Fáil government by the then Minister for Labour, Bertie Ahern, in 1990. It was opposed by the left, opposed by ourselves, but it was supported by the leadership of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions and sold to them on the ground that it avoided the worst excesses of the anti-union legislation being introduced in the UK. However, that legislation now is putting up obstacle after obstacle to workers and trade unions in standing up and fighting for their rights and conditions. Anti-union legislation has been used in recent times against not just Ryanair pilots, but against NASRA, ambulance paramedics, Tesco workers and many, many others. So this bill seeks to amend that legislation to restore rights to workers, to restore rights to trade unionists, and to reduce the power imbalance between capital and labour. The trade union legislation in this country effectively bans political strikes. Would the Dunnes Stores anti-apartheid strike of the mid-1980s be possible under the current trade union legislation? Would the PAYE tax protests of the late 1970s be possible under the current trade union legislation? I think not. And there are current issues which trade unionists, workers are hampered from campaigning on by this legislation. Strikes against sexism, strikes against racism, strikes for action on the climate emergency, for action on the housing emergency. All of these would run straight smack bang into the Industrial Relations Act 1990. Injunctions are regularly taken out and granted by the courts against workers fighting for their rights. The idea of solidarity action, the idea pioneered by Connolly and Larkin, that an injury to one is an injury to all, and that workers should take solidarity action if necessary in support of other workers, illegal under the current legislation. Tesco workers pressurised not to picket outside the shops, not to picket outside their place of employment, but to go outside the shopping centres where those shops were based. I could give many other examples. This bill would seek to restrict the grounds on which an employer could get injunction against workers or a trade union fighting for their rights. The bill also aims to cut out state interference in trade union affairs. Under the 1990 Act, there must be a secret ballot before industrial action, and 1 week's notice of industrial action must be given to the employer. Look at the way in which this is used. Look at the way in which it was interpreted by the courts during the summer in the Ryanair case, where the judge refused to accept a sworn affidavit by a trade union official that the ballot had been conducted in the proper fashion, and in effect asked that the union would give over the names of their members in a public fashion when the employer is a notorious anti-union employer who only granted trade union recognition under pressure in a previous case. That's completely unacceptable. Unions should be permitted by law to organise their own ballots. Whether they want a secret ballot or an open ballot is a matter for the union, not a matter for the state. That is the spirit of this bill. The union should decide, workers should decide, not the state, not the establishment, and I move the bill here now at first stage.